Welcome back to this week's episode of the MovieBabble Podcast. This week you've got myself, and I'm joined by Nick and Brennan as we're talking about movies. So it is a bit of a slower week. We've kind of gotten past the Tenet and Mulan hype. We're now just kind of moving towards nothingness again as we roll into October, and theatrical releases are just kind of dropping again as well. But we did have a couple new releases this week. We had Infidel, which opened up to $1.5 million domestically, which didn't even crack the top two spots domestically. And then The Secrets We Keep, which was a much more limited release and opened up to a whopping $89,955,000. $89,955. So nothing huge. Tenet pulled in about 4.7 million, only about a 30% drop, which is still fairly solid. It did open up in 120 more theaters. So it's going probably not really where anybody would want it to be. It certainly doesn't appear to have saved theaters, especially with how many movies have been pulled back in the weeks since its release. But it's still making some progress, sitting at about $36 million domestically. And even the New Mutants really only had a 23.4% drop, sitting at about $17 million domestically, which isn't as high, but New Mutants also doesn't need to make as much money. I still don't think it's really going to break even, but it has at least not completely squandered all of Disney's resources.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Tenet for me is like last week we saw that really big dip. It was like around 70% or something like that. And this week it's pretty good, less than 29.9%. It's not too bad. Obviously, Warner Brothers, we talked about this extensively. Like they wanted this to be a really, really big moneymaker for them. They reports were saying they probably needed to make right around 400, 500 million to break even or something around there. Um, so that's not great in terms of what we're looking at. You said like 30 to 40 million in the United States box office. But I think it is interesting to kind of see the week to week drops on this. And I think Warner Brothers, the big reason why they wanted to release this now was because they figured, well, like a lot of these movies are not going to release in theaters, and we have been seeing more and more things get pushed back recently. So it really is just Tenet and New Mutants and also Unhinged, which is still hanging around and doing actually okay for Solstice Studios and the new distributor. So I guess good for them, kind of keeping afloat until things get reasonable in the world again, I guess. But I am really interested to see week to week what Tenet does from here moving forward. Because, yeah, there's really, I guess if you wanted to go to a theater, which again, I don't recommend at all, and I hope you stay safe out there, but it's really the only thing, only the show playing in town. So I kind of do see maybe $4 to $3 million just week over week over week for this movie moving forward. I don't know. What do you think, Brennan?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what we're going to see is probably, like, as you said, there's nothing coming out, and even the news of Wonder Woman getting pushed back and other movies getting pushed back. Um, we're just going to see like a maybe 4 month block potentially. We'll see what happens to James Bond, but just a bunch of months here where it's literally just Tenet sitting in the theaters, and that'll probably allow it to make 2 million, 3 million every weekend as we keep going on. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the only positive for them. But yeah, this isn't going to be a big hit. They're looking at the international numbers, and that's what they want to be uh, looking good. And they're over 200 million already overseas, so that's all right. But it was a gamble, and they took the risk. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, shout out to Unhinged for now surpassing 27 million globally.
Yeah, I mean, the little Tenet that could. Maybe it'll make it up the hill. But yeah, I think like that is the one thing that's going to work out for it, especially if we have stuff later in the year that gets moved back even further. I mean, we were talking about before we hopped on about, there's rumors that Bond and even Black Widow and Soul might get moved or with some kind of hybrid release, kind of like Mulan had. So I think Tenet's going to get some of its victories in the absence of any real competition. I mean, Tenet is potentially our only blockbuster this year, which is just kind of crazy to think about, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, and so Box Office Mojo has Tenet at right around 239 million worldwide. And I read a report in Variety that actually had them above 250 million globally. So that's another thing in here too, where it's Warner Brothers. We've talked about this before, but Warner Brothers just being like, "Hey, we actually made 20 million in our opening weekend," and then it's like, no, that was like from days and days of preview screenings and things like that, just to really bolster their numbers and make them look as good as possible. Just really finagling the numbers. So who really knows what exactly the right number is right now, especially just because I feel like all theaters are being a little slower to report earnings for the week. So we're looking at that number right now, and who knows if they can get to that 400 million mark. And then I said this last week, I think, but there will definitely be a longer tail on streaming and VOD, and maybe they do something where once it goes to VOD, it's maybe not that 20 million or that $20 mark, or maybe it's something like 10, a little higher than you normally get with like a week one VOD drop, which is like around like $5 or $6. But I'm really fascinated to see, because I think a lot of studios are looking at Tenet and just monitoring it so just closely, because they figure this is kind of the thing that will maybe just look at how we release movies moving forward. And I think it's really fascinating, because I think we've talked Tenet so many times, and I still haven't seen the movie, but I think there is still so much angst around the industry just about how this movie performs, and so what other studios can do with their big budget movies. I think it's a huge waiting game, and I think there's still so much that hasn't been played out.
Yeah, I think honestly, it seems like, as you said, that one report has a little over 250. I think passing 300 million in this current climate is not something to be upset about. I know, obviously, they need to break even. They need to pass 400 million to do that. But I think in a world where most theaters are only letting 50% of people sit, I think that's not like the worst thing out there, but it's definitely not ideal, and it's not gonna lead other studios to follow suit and release their movies in theaters. But it's an interesting gamble they took, and I do think this movie will perform very well once it hits VOD. I think this is one that there are probably a lot of people that are waiting for it still, as you are, Nick, just to rent it once it comes to the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, and same with like Antebellum was a movie that came out this week, which none of us saw because we don't want to pay $20 to see it. Um, and I've been very against paying that extra amount for these movies that are pretty average looking or just not just super top tier. But I would pay a little more to see Tenet rent. Like, I don't know if I'd pay the $20, but yeah, if they did something $10, $12, like I would probably pay that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities that Warner Brothers can do here. So I don't know. I'm not willing to say that Tenet is a failure in any particular way. Obviously it would have performed much better in a normal world, and how great a normal world would be right now. But I think there's just so many just weird and possibly inventive things they can do with it still.
Yeah, I think Tenet can potentially have kind of like movies used to way back when, like 40 years ago, where movies could actually run for like half the year. Just because, I mean, there's really no reason to pull it unless you're just like making a large push for VOD. But I mean, just as people are filtering in and more theaters open up, or more spaces in theaters open up, or people feel more comfortable, I feel like, yeah, Tenet can kind of stick around for a while.
I'm interested to see if this movie can potentially break records in terms of how many weeks they're at the top of the box office. Right now they're at 3. I know that E.T. I think has like some ridiculous number up in the teens, but this thing could definitely be first for like 10 weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and with theaters too, because there's nothing, like we said, there's nothing really coming out. I'm fascinated to see what theaters do if there's some kind of break even equation that they figure out where it's like, hey, it's probably less expensive just to close our doors again, because let's say we're at the beginning of November and there really isn't anything coming out, and No Time to Die is pushed and all these other movies are pushed. If it's like this, basically the same group of movies with a couple indies sprinkled in there, I wonder if theaters get to the point too where it's just like, hey, it just we're really hemorrhaging money in terms of just keeping our doors open and like air conditioning and paying our employees and things like that. I wonder if there's a time that theaters are looking at where like, hey, we need to close our doors again because it just makes more sense for our business. I don't know. It is so weird. I think like we come to this every week and it's like, I don't really know. We'll see. And I think it's so touch and go for I think everyone involved in this.
Yeah, I think everything's just kind of up in the air. And like the other issue is that the theaters were really struggling because there was no real bailout for that industry in particular earlier in the year. So I think, especially as other movies get pulled back, I think the studios have other things to fall back on, but the theater chains are really going to get pinched even more than they already are. And I mean, they've already missed their biggest, most profitable season. So even now, like September is usually that in January, usually the deadest months of the year movie wise. So they don't really have much to pick from in terms of profitable months coming up. So yeah, theaters might die, but Netflix is surviving the protests so far, and has quite the spread of top 10 movies this week. So I'm just going to run through them real quick. So in the number one spot, we had The Take, followed by The Smurfs 2 at number 2, The Devil All the Time releasing at number 3, The Social Dilemma in its second week at number 4, Pets United at number 5, The Paramedic at number 6, The Babysitter Killer Queen at number 7, The Secret Life of Pets 2, number 8, How to Train Your Dragon 2, number 9, and The Smurfs 10. There's a lot of kids movies on the top 10 this week. Secret Life of Pets is out there repping Illumination. 2 Smurfs movies kind of surprises me. They must be new, at least to Netflix. But yeah, Cuties no longer in the top 10. I wasn't sure if that would really last very long. But yeah, it's a Netflix top 10. It's really not over exciting. I do know we want to talk about The Devil All the Time a little bit though. I haven't seen it, but I understand you guys both have, right?
Yeah, I really like this movie. This was one I was really looking forward to. I feel like weirdly, like I watched the trailer like so many times because it's just a really, really good trailer, and I like this movie. It's one of those where I admire so much about it, but I can't quite say I fell in love with it because it has a few issues. I don't think the narration works particularly well, and this movie was adapted from a book of the same name, I believe, and actually the author of the book, Donald Ray Pollock, actually narrated the movie itself, and it's kind of cool. He has a good voice. He sounds like a little like Sam Elliott, and it works. He has these good Southern draws that works for the backwoods story this movie is telling. But it's one of those where you could cut the narration out of this movie totally, and the movie works just the same, if not better, because it's not spoon feeding you information. That's like the biggest thing because like this cast is so good. It's just like Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, Jason Clarke, Riley Keough, Sebastian Stan, Haley Bennett, and Mia Wasikowska, Liza Scanlon. Like there's just so many people in this movie where like you can let them make a few looks and you can totally understand what they're saying and you don't need narration to be like, it was at this moment that Tom Holland was very, very sad and thought about his life. Like that happens a few times. You're like, okay, movie, like I get it. But I really, really like it. I think this movie is it really rests on the shoulders of its great cast. It's a little vignette story and then it comes together in the end. I thought really nicely. But yeah, I really like this movie. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, Bill Skarsgård's good too. He's more prominent
that's right.
here. Yeah, in the early parts of the movie, but he's solid in this as well. I didn't mind the movie. I didn't love it as you liked it a little bit more than I did, but I didn't mind the narration. I thought some of his like I think you're right. It was overused, but some of the lines were actually quite funny. But for the most part, I did enjoy this thing, and I think we do have to mention Robert Pattinson though, because I didn't watch the trailer. I actually really didn't know that this movie was coming out till about a week before it did, and so I didn't know what to expect from him. And then I see him, and once his mouth opens, I'm like, oh my god, this is great.
He has the most amazing Southern accent in this movie, and I'm not good with accents. I mean, I can tell sometimes when they're really, really bad, but sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds fine, so I can normally roll with it. But his Southern accent is so cartoonishly evil, and I really really loved it. And he acts through it, so it works really well. But yeah, he's in this movie for like 20 minutes, and he's just like this vile human scourge of the earth. I love everything he's doing in this movie. He's so creepy. Yeah, he's so interesting to me because yeah, we have the Batman coming out next year, but he's turning into one of these guys where you can just put him front and center in a movie like Good Time or just any of these other things, or you can just let him like go crazy in your movie for 15, 20 minutes as a supporting character, and he's just as interesting. That just makes me excited because you just never really know what project he'll choose next. He'll just be like, oh, that looks really interesting. I'm gonna go do that, or I'm gonna go do another Claire Denis film, or I'm gonna be the Batman. I just think he's set himself up to be so fascinating, and yeah, I love everything he's doing here. I also really love Tom Holland. I think Tom Holland is terrific in this movie. I really love him as Spider-Man, but I think this is probably my favorite performance for him, and it definitely shows him in a very different light because this movie is incredibly violent and has a lot of thriller tendencies to it. Yeah, I really love both of them. I thought they were the two standouts for me.
Tom Holland's kind of a badass here. I didn't really know what his role was going to be, but he's pretty badass in this movie. But yeah, Robert Pattinson. I mean, one more thing about him: he's recovered from COVID now. They're shooting the Batman again, so I'm glad he's all right.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, I really like. I'm happy to hear that he's healthy, and it's just always good to hear. But there's a few things that I saw people that were frustrated with this movie. One, I think everyone was like, okay, but like, what's the point of this? It's pretty violent, and from what I understand, the book is actually even more violent. If they would have been if they would have played from the book just totally, it would have been like probably an NC-17 kind of movie from the really bad violence in it. But I think that's kind of the point of this movie. It's very futile. All the things that are happening, and just there's a really pained sadness in watching all of these mostly good-intentioned people break bad for things a lot of they're out of their control, and it really talks about the cyclical nature of just pain and suffering and violence. I thought it was really came together really well, but it seems like people are probably more lukewarm on this movie, like you, Brennan. I get it, but I think these kind of movies, like these like dark Coen Brothers-esque backwood movies, I really like them, and I thought there was a lot of really cool stuff in this one.
Yeah, it's one I definitely want to check out. I just didn't have a ton of time to get to it this week, so I will watch it by proxy through you guys.
We're happy to help.
But yeah, it's really not just a crazy release week in general. I mean, Netflix is also going to drop Enola Holmes this coming week, so they're definitely still releasing stuff, but compared to all the chaos we had with Cuties 2 weeks ago now, it feels pretty tame. And then we also had TIFF, which Brennan, I know you checked out quite a bit, including one of the movies I've seen most talked about on Twitter, if you want to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, so by the time we did our recording last week, I was able to speak about 3 movies, and now I can speak about my back half of the festival. I watched another 3 films. The first one I checked out last week was The Father. Anthony Hopkins is crazy in this movie. He's phenomenal. It's also just completely unique, and I did see it in a drive-in setting, which was very cool. I love that they did that because, I mean, it's a film festival. You want to diversify things. They had a few in-person showings. Most of it was digital, but then they had a couple options for a drive-in. So I went downtown. Not a lot of traffic. It was a good time. Watched The Father. Fantastic screen as well. I've been to a few drive-ins, and this like they really did it up nicely. So that was great. I'm looking forward to seeing Anthony Hopkins in the Best Actor race for that one. I think there's a real possibility that he goes all the way. I know he's won one time before for Silence of the Lambs. It's been a long time, so he might be due. Pieces of a Woman is another one I checked out. That's a really good one as well. Vanessa Kirby is fantastic in that movie. You also have, I forget which Safdie it is. I think it's Benny Safdie is in it. The one who acts in Good Time.
Yeah,
Benny Safdie.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, he's in it as well. Not a huge role, but it's neat to see him. Shia LaBeouf's great in this film. That's a movie that is tough to get through at times. just because it deals with some very deep subject matter. I don't want to spoil anything, but Netflix did pick up this movie, so that's going to be really accessible for everyone. But it's another one of those movies that not quite like the Charlie Kaufman movie a few weeks ago, but I think there will be a lot of just kind of your average movie watchers that watch it and kind of don't understand what they're going for in the film. Or maybe you want the tempo to pick up a little bit, but I do think it was fantastic, and it's definitely relying on some phenomenal performances. Last and definitely least is Summer of '85. I was looking forward to it. It's a French film about two. I think they're both around 18 years old. Two like gay lovers, and they kind of experienced this nice summer together, ups and downs here and there. I was looking forward to it, and then I watched it, and like they're essentially just trying to rehash Call Me by Your Name, like every kind of beat. I mean, a lot of the story points are obviously different, but the vibes are the same. There are even some scenes in Call Me by Your Name where there's just music and Timothy Chalamet's dancing. I know that's a famous scene. They had one that was similar to that in this movie, and like halfway through the movie, I was kind of like, this would be much better, or this feels like I'm watching kind of a Netflix original rom-com, and it kind of fell to that level. So it's a little bit of a yikes, but that was my TIFF experience. It's kind of sad they only had 50 original feature films this year, and last year they had a little over 300. So it was definitely a thinned down festival, but I'm glad it got to happen.
It seems like from reading all the reactions to everything, it seems like Anthony Hopkins in The Father is probably the front runner for Best Actor at this point. Like, obviously, there's been so many movies that have been pushed back, so we haven't seen a lot of it. But other than his work in The Father, like, I can't really think of any other actor who you would think is probably going up for Best Actor at this point. Maybe Delroy Lindo, but like
Yeah.
they might do something like Best Supporting for him.
So that's the interesting thing. I know this week officially, I'm pretty sure Variety reported that they will be campaigning Lindo in the Best Actor spot.
Oh, perfect.
And I loved him in that movie. That is arguably my favorite of the year. But Anthony Hopkins did bring me to tears several times in this thing.
Jeez.
He's good. And the movie is just it's done in a way that you wouldn't expect. I remember watching it and expecting it to be very kind of like just I don't know how to explain it. Just kind of like a movie. You're watching things play out, but this movie is very psychological. It's very different than what I thought it was going to be going into it. I thought I was just going to watch a kind of your basic drama, but this movie plays with the viewer's mind a lot, and it added an extra edge to the movie that it definitely needed. And it's one of my favorites of the year so far. I mean, I haven't seen too much that's quality this year, but it's definitely up in the top three.
Yeah, I think of probably Ben Affleck as weirdly in the Best Actor race right now for the way back, and just in terms of the competition, and maybe I don't know, probably Gary Oldman in The Mank will probably be there at some point when that comes out on Netflix. But it seems like Vanessa Kirby too for Pieces of Woman is definitely up there, along with Frances McDormand for Best Actress so far.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, Colin.
You guys are forgetting about Adam Sandler and Hubie Halloween. We have yet to see that yet. So
It's not Hubby Halloween? I was saying Hubby the whole entire time.
I don't know what it is.
Who knows?
Maybe it's both.
Just sign with fancy writing HH. We are going to be running the FYC campaign for that movie. You guys are ready for that?
I am ready. I'm prepared.
I'm ready for Hubie.
the thing about Nomadland is obviously that's the movie that's getting the praise, like what 90, like high 90s on Metacritic. I am very fearful that that's a movie that the Academy will not pay attention to. I think they might have to, and I think just because there aren't that many movies even coming out this year, they will be forced to really look at that movie and give it a lot of consideration. But it is one of those movies that just doesn't feel like an awards film. But just the magnitude of how much praise it's gotten, winning Venice and a lot, I do think that will help it. But if it didn't win Venice and like it was talked about at TIFF, but not to this extent, I feel like this would be a movie that is loved by film Twitter and no one else. But I'm excited for you guys to get to watch it whenever it does come out. But yeah, I really do hope it does well.
Yeah, I can't wait. And it seems like Vanessa Kirby, it's just a really fraught and just tough to watch performance, but she's just really good in it. Weirdly, like, yeah, there's so much to fall in this, but it does seem like this is going to be like a really good Best Actress race because you have those two, and then probably Elizabeth Moss and Invisible Man. Just, I'm
Mhm.
sure there's more to come, but I know like the past few years, like I wasn't really excited about um, Judy for what's her face Renee Zellweger. That was just like a very boring pick to me. But it seemed like there's gonna be some cool people involved in this. However, the Oscars seems to shake out.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting race, just given how weird this year has been. um, I'm personally excited to see the Five Bloods get some hype and Delroy
Mhm.
Lindo get some momentum. I saw that article you were talking about as well. But yeah, Hubie Halloween's taking it over. They don't
I
even
do
need to
love
hold the Oscars. They've been
I
complaining about the runtime. 5 minutes. They just walk up, say the word Sandler. Oscars are over.
I do love, however, that Ben Affleck's running third right now in the Best Actor race. I know that's going to change by the time the Oscars come, but in my mind, I think I'd probably have him at number three right now, behind Lindo and Hopkins.
Yeah, I love Ben Affleck in The Way Back. I'm one of those people that really, really like that movie. Probably too much, but I thought he was terrific in it. I wouldn't like if he got a nomination. I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
he was good.
it,
It's a good movie.
yeah, he did a really good job with that movie. But I'm with you there on that one, Nick. I mean, part of it also is there just like hasn't been a lot that I've seen, so pretty much everything I've seen sticks out more. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. That was like the last thing I saw before everything shut down.
It's got a special place in your heart.
I'll always remember Ben fondly. Um, but yeah, that is TIFF. And then of course we've also been watching just random stuff in our own time. I know Nick watched the highly anticipated Mulan this week. If you want to talk about that.
Ah, yes, the most anticipated movie that no one's really ever talking about. I guess it took The Hunt's place as the movie that the most important movie of the year that everyone's talking about but hasn't seen or whatever. But yeah, luckily I had a little fancy screener for this movie, so I didn't have to pay the $30. And I don't understand why anyone would pay $30 for this movie. So this is just another for me. I feel like I've been pretty vocal. I just don't like any of the Disney live action movies, and part of it is on principle, where it's like I like this seems like pretty soulless like work and cash grabs and whatnot. But I'm always willing to give these movies a chance because like hey, like they're cool source material. If you want to do something different with it, like I'm all for it. But yeah, I don't really see this movie justifying its own existence really in any way. So they made it more of like an epic movie, a big war movie, instead of there's no songs or anything like that. There's no Mushu, which I'm sure people were very disappointed about. They tried to make it a little more grounded with like these like weird little flourishes of magic, and there's a really cool witch character, which I thought was the most interesting part of the movie, um, who plays the main antagonist in all of this. But yeah, it's just this movie is just kind of dead on arrival for me. Like it lacks any sort of really good personality. The lead actress who plays Mulan, her name's Yifei Liu, who just came in under fire for Unright for kind of being like I support Hong Kong and not the protests, which is probably just an entire another conversation about this movie because they filmed it near internment camps in China and where there's reportedly genocide occurring, and then Disney thanked those regions in the credits. That's just a whole other can of worms that probably deserves its own podcast. But yeah, just for the movie itself, it's just not very good. Like it's just kind of there, and there's an awesome cast, and I guess one of the positives is they cast actual Chinese actors in it. So you have Donnie Yen in there, and Jet Li is in there as well, and Zima from The Farewell, who I just love every time he talks. Like he's a great actor. But yeah, it's just not really. There's just nothing really here. I don't really recommend anyone see this until it's on Disney Plus. Um, and like I guess in December is when they announced that it was going to drop because it's just $30 such a high price point, and there's just really nothing here. I don't hate it. Like I didn't. I think I was angry when I watched the live action Lion King. I was really mad leaving that theater because it was just so soulless. But this one, I don't really hate. It's just you can't really say it does one thing particularly well, except it looks pretty good and they put a lot of money into it. But yeah, it's just sort of there. I wouldn't recommend this for most people.
Yeah, I'm definitely not paying for it until it drops for free. So my opinions on it can wait 2 more months.
Yeah, like there's not that much longer to wait. I mean, I think time will probably go by decently fast. Like $30 is just pretty steep. So I'm not really interested in going out and renting Mulan for that, especially just because it didn't get the greatest reception. But yeah, I just want to second that Lion King rhetoric you were saying. That movie made me mad as well.
It's just, oh my God. I'm waiting for the shoe to drop with Disney because I feel like with all the success they've had with Marvel and I guess Star Wars, which kind of dwindled by the end, but they've made so much money in off of the live action movies as well, or even like Aladdin, which is another movie where I was like, cool, you just made the genie wanna fuck someone. That was kind of like your take on the movie, you know? Like there wasn't really anything else in there. And that movie still made like $1 million or $1 billion. Yeah, a million, geez. But I'm still waiting for this to kind of just dwindle, like go away, because all of these movies seem to make decent money, but no one really likes them, and it seems like Disney just can't really get a original property off the ground. I mean, they tried with Artemis Fowl early this year, and that was a hilarious movie that is just not very good, and probably one of the worst movies of the year. Um, so I'm just like, I feel like at some point Disney has to like figure out like, hey, like we're not really making anything new, and we can't keep mining our own content for forever. It's kind of weird. I know they're doing really good work with The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, but that's TV, and I don't know. I haven't really been blown away by a non-Marvel Disney movie in so long.
I think we'll have to wait to see how Jungle Cruise does. I think that'll be like their big like, do we actually, because that movie has a cast that can sell probably a big, like for a big audience. However, at this point, like we're pretty far out. I haven't seen any promotional material. But if I were to like put my bets on it today, I wouldn't think that movie would be like the biggest hit ever. I feel like it'd make a lot of money, but not be like some insane like blockbuster.
Yeah, it's weird too because I think they have that Cruella origin movie coming out starring Emma Stone, which is just very very strange. But it's directed by the guy who did I, Tonya, Craig Gillespie, and like Emma Thompson's in it. I think Paul Walter Hauser's in it as well. There's like a ton of people in it, so that's one where I'm like, this sounds like so weird that maybe it works.
Mm-hmm.
But like yeah, like I'm like The Little Mermaid. Like I don't really know. Like sure, if you want to remake that, I don't really know what they're gonna do that's like interesting in that movie. Maybe it's just like the cast because it's a really interesting cast. And I think like there's so many different people in that one as well. But yeah, I don't know. I just every time I watch one of these live action movies from Disney, I just get more confused about what their overall goal is.
Yeah, I saw an article the other day that was talking about how they really just like under the Iger era, they've acquired a lot of things that are making money, but they haven't really, other than really the last few animated movies, Disney hasn't really had original successes or things that they already owned. They've been succeeding mainly on like Marvel and things that they bought and things that they're remaking, but they've kind of reached the end of the well of things that people just have a great love for already. I mean, they've remade or are in the process of remaking all the princess movies. They did Aladdin, The Lion King, Mulan. They really need to come up with some new ideas. So, yeah, I think Jungle Cruise, whenever that comes out, will be something to keep an eye on and see if Disney can launch something of their own, especially now that Star Wars even is kind of dried up. You don't have the original cast there anymore. So whatever Star Wars they do next is going to have to be something new, which I feel is just as risky given the criticism they've gotten for the past few Star Wars movies.
Yeah, and I guess I should say like I think their animated stuff has been really really good recently too. I feel like that like Pixar and then Disney Animation they're like all right just go do your thing and then release your movie. So those have been really good. I'm actually really looking forward to Soul because that movie just looks like it's gonna just make me cry for days on end. It just looks so good. But yeah, like I think one of like the kind of like the open secrets too on their live action stuff has been like there's been really bad meddling and on basically all of them. Like A Wrinkle in Time, there was just not good stuff on that. Like the Nutcracker and the Four Realms. Remember that movie? Like that one was a nightmare. Artemis Fowl was also a nightmare too. Just it seems like Kenneth Branagh was like done with that movie before it came out. So yeah, it's just I don't really know what their live action like process is. It seems like I know that they tried to like fix that a lot, and there's the whole Star Wars debate again, which it's just like I don't want to have that discussion again. But yeah, it makes me more and more confused with each movie.
Yeah, I mean, they're Disney, so I'm sure they'll figure it out. But yeah, right now they don't really have a lot of original stuff and I mean by original stuff that they didn't have to purchase another company to make, that's working out for them. But it is Disney, so maybe they'll just make an eternal deal with Kurt Russell again and start cranking out movies about computers wearing tennis shoes and whatnot.
Sure, why not?
And then, yeah, Brennan's seen a lot of TIFF stuff lately. We talked about that. And then I've just been watching Ape movies. So I just got the urge to watch the Andy Serkis Planet of the Apes movies about a week and a half ago. So I watched those. I watched War for the first time in about 2 years, and it still holds up as one of my top 10 favorite movies ever. Watched the original the other night, and I really just appreciate that one a little bit more every time because I feel like people get really caught up in the big plot, the big plot twist. You know, it's kind of up there with Darth Vader being Luke's dad is, you know, one of the biggest movie plot twists with Charlton Heston just seeing the statue
alert,
in
man.
the desert. I mean, come on, it's been 52 years.
I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen Empire yet.
My bad. It's coming to theaters.
We're canceling Collin after this episode.
I plan to watch it tonight, dude. Really?
Yeah, but I feel like people just get really caught up in it. They kind of miss the whole point of the movie, which is just like Charlton Heston's character just constantly taking bites out of American imperialism and like just the crackpot like pseudoscience religion that the apes have, and like all these blurred lines between the ape state and the ape church. And I think there's just a lot of good commentary there, which I feel like probably comes mainly from Rod Serling, because he worked on the first draft of the script. So I know like the Statue of Liberty shot was from his draft of it. I know it was hacked quite a bit after he left the project, but there's just a lot of commentary that feels like something you'd see from the Twilight Zone that's still really present in that movie. And I think that's what all the sequels afterwards really lack. Because we were talking about this a little while earlier. Brennan felt a little bit differently, but I really only think there's like one solid sequel to the original Apes films. Brennan can refute that, but yeah, I feel like the first one just works on such a different level, whereas the other four just kind of slowly, steadily devolve into just a lot of like camp with people running around in rubber ape masks, and like the apes just suddenly become smart, and the last one's like an ape civil war, and just kind of gets a little crazy for me. But yeah, the original still holds up even 52 years later.
Yeah, that first one's pretty good. Great movie. I remember as a kid, I think my dad got like the box set. He's like, oh, I remember watching this when I was younger. I'll show it to you. We go home and we watch the first one. And with that ending, I'm like, yeah, we got to watch the next one right now. As a little kid, I mean, you love all five. Like, that's just how kids work. But yeah, I mean, I can agree with you. I think that obviously as they go on, they're not as good. But I will always defend the third one and the fourth one. 2 and 5 can go, but 3 and 4.
See, I'm a little different because I really like how ambitious the second one is, even if it doesn't really pull everything off. But they're just like going for it. There's this whole like cult of a nuclear bomb, which is kind of the antagonist for the whole movie. And like it doesn't always work, but I really like what they're going for. Even if with the reduced budget of the time, it does not hold up well just with the environment. But I admire what they were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you guys, but the best piece of commentary in the Apes franchise has always been Abraham Lincoln from the end of Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes.
I love Marky Mark's first foray into acting. Planet of the Apes.
I think Tim Burton famously said that he'd rather jump out of a building than make a sequel.
Yeah, honestly, I think that movie has like some solid things going for it. You know, I think the makeup is just phenomenal.
Oh,
like
yeah,
the way
that's
they
good.
really take it a step forward and blend everybody's faces into the ape faces. But yeah, that movie is just nonsense. I watched it one time and I was like, I never need to watch this again.
That's a movie I watch. Like I try to watch the Circus trilogy now every year because I just love all three so much, especially War. But and then the originals I watch every couple of years. But that one's one that, you know what, I watch it every 5 years. You know. But no, you're right. The makeup in that's good. And just a funny tidbit, I got added I think a year and a half ago to some Planet of the Apes groups on Facebook just to see what they were posting just for fun. And one of them is like a very hardcore. They're kind of, I guess a lot of them are probably older. Probably grew up with the original ones. They're probably born in like the 70s, and they like can't stand the circus ones because they used visual effects. And it's so funny to be just seeing some of their posts. They're like, Disney needs to bring it back to using makeup. We need that pure Planet of the Apes vibe.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So there are people out there like that.
We do need to thank the 2001 Planet of the Apes though for a lot of like big casting changes. Because I read up on it a while back, and so apparently Marky Mark had Matt Damon's role in Ocean's 11, but left to do Planet of the Apes.
Oh, thank God.
And then Tim Roth had the role of Snape in Harry Potter, but also left to do that movie. And so that's how we got Alan Rickman as Snape.
Wow.
So we do have to thank Tim Burton for something.
I didn't realize that.
Tim Roth is on another level though in this Planet of the Apes movie. He's crazy. It's just in Burton's, he's on something.
I kind of would love to see Tim Roth as Snape. That probably doesn't work, but it's just so weird that I really, really want to see it.
Yeah, Snape wouldn't necessarily be the first character I see him as in Harry Potter, but now that like the images in my head, I'm really curious to see what that would have been like. So yeah, we stand Tim Roth. It's unfortunate that we have to see his Snape, but I honestly do like him in this movie though. I think that is another high point in this very low point of a movie is just like how insane the villains are, and they just like go full throttle with just really like the animal insanity of them. But yeah, I would not recommend that Planet of the Apes specifically. And that pretty much wraps up this week in movies. So we'll be talking about some other new releases next week. So Enola Holmes drops on Netflix, and then we also have Kajillionaire, which is a movie that Nick and I saw at Sundance, which is just a bizarre but really funny movie that I think a lot of people should check out just because there's a specific sequence where Evan Rachel Wood is just like physical comedy acting as hard as she can, and it's just wonderful. But yeah, we'll be back talking about those movies and some more movies. Probably won't be talking about the rest of the Ape sequels, but maybe we'll hit those some other day. And remember, you can always check us out online at MovieBabble.com.